Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
It's the rider on the pale horse, the fourth rider of the apocalypse. Or it's nothing to worry about, and we should be more concerned about the seasonal flu or measles or something, depending on who you ask. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Of course, I'm talking about the coronavirus outbreak and the spread of this virus. It's now called COVID-19. That's the term for the outbreak. The virus itself is officially called SARS-CoV-2 or SARS-CoV-2. I don't know how they're dealing with the acronym, but anyway, that's the name of the virus, the outbreak, COVID-19. We'll talk about that in the second half of the program, try to sort through some of the claims that are being thrown around out there and present you with some good information. No, I am not an expert in virology or epidemiology, but I'm married to a woman who graduated with a degree with honors in molecular biology with a genetics emphasis, so she can understand the scientific papers and also understand when people who are talking about the science really don't understand the science about which they're speaking. So hopefully we'll sort some of that out. But first, as we come to you this February 23rd, 2020, we're just a couple of weeks away from our first conference of the year. We'll talk about that in the second half of the program as well. We're just 2 months away, presuming we can travel, but it will be what it will be. In late April, our first overseas trip for 2020, and that's to Scotland for the Scottish Bible Prophecy Conference. And so it seemed like a good idea tonight to bring back some audio. This is just a few weeks old. A few weeks back, we had the opportunity to interview one of the other featured speakers at the Scottish Bible Prophecy Conference, who's made it his life's work to try to decipher a mystery that is Hollywood film level mysterious. We're talking like National Treasure or Raiders of the Lost Ark stuff here, except that this is real. And if he's right, this could be world-changing. I am, of course, talking about the mysterious Copper Scroll and the man who appears to have figured out exactly what it's pointing to and where, the director of the Copper Scroll Project online at copperscrollproject.com, Jim Barfield. Jim, it's good to talk with you again.
Well, Derek, it's great to see you again, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
For people who may not have seen the programs that we recorded last year with you and with Shelley Neese about the book in which she describes the story, your journey to find out and decode the Copper Scroll. For people who are just now hearing about this for the first time, what is the Copper Scroll?
The Copper Scroll is exactly what it sounds like. It's one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's 7 feet long and about a foot wide, and it describes the locations of 57 hoards of treasure, and I'm convinced that those treasures are from the First Temple period. That is exciting because apparently Jeremiah was in charge of this, and he had to put this scroll together so it would last a long time. That's why it's on copper. They took a stylus and a small hammer, I'm sure, and tapped the letters into the Copper Scroll. Actually, they did it so that it would come out protruding from the document, which means they had to do everything backwards, which is unusual. And you can actually see on there where they made mistakes and they went back, and the only way they could erase it was tap it back into the copper, smooth it back out in a flat way. But it is a document designed for the future, and this is absolutely the future. And I believe it's the time for these things to come out. And one of the interesting things about the Copper Scroll, the Jewish people have told me that they've known for a long time that it would be a goy or a man from the nations or a Gentile
yeah,
that would make the discovery. And I fit pretty much all of those categories. So that's what it is, where we're headed with it.
Well, we'll put in the notes that go along with this video wherever you're watching it, whether it's on YouTube or at skywatchtv.com. If you look in the notes below, we'll put links to the previous interviews with Jim so you can get a little more in-depth discussion there of the Copper Scroll and its history. In fact, I'm going to put up on the screen here a video because we were blessed during the SkyWatch TV tour of Israel back this past May that you happened to be in country at the same time and were gracious enough to give up some of your time to show our group a replica of the Copper Scroll. You met us at Qumran. We were delayed because, as we've discovered, that Highway 90 along the west side of the Dead Sea is subject to a lot of sinkholes. As the salt water of the Dead Sea recedes, it's replaced by fresh groundwater, and that's dissolving the salt that's holding the dirt together underneath the road. But you showed us a replica of the Copper Scroll, and the connection to Jeremiah and Qumran. I'm really fascinated about that. For timing purposes, to give people a sense of where Jeremiah fits in history. He was in the 6th century BC, around the time that Nebuchadnezzar and his Chaldean army from Babylon were getting ready to come and sack Jerusalem, sack the temple. So this would be in the 580s BC, 590s BC, somewhere around there. What was Jeremiah's role at Qumran, and why did the scroll end up there?
One of the most important things about Qumran is it was, and it will be again someday, I hope, the home of the prophets. In its scrolls, it describes amazing things that nobody even thought about. And how the scholars haven't seen these things is beyond me. That at the time of Jeremiah, there was a conversation in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and there's a lot of information in there about a teacher of righteousness. Well, that teacher of righteousness just happened to be Jeremiah. There's even a document in there called the Community Scroll where Jeremiah he does all the dictation, and Baruch, his scribe, is writing it down, and it even notes it. At the end of that scroll, it says that Jeremiah dictated and Baruch wrote all these things down. So he had a much bigger role in it than what people would imagine. And there's also information in the Dead Sea Scrolls about Yeshua, Jesus, and John the Baptist. They date, there's three prophecies, or at least notations, that the teacher of righteousness, and at the time, Yeshua would have obviously been part of that, and he would have been part of that, the men of the Dead Sea Scrolls. There are people that would disagree, but more and more people are beginning to catch on. It says that after the death of the teacher, 40 years later, the men of lies would be destroyed. 40 years after Yeshua, after his death, the temple was destroyed.
Right.
And 40 years from the time that Jeremiah began his ministry until the temple was destroyed, the first temple was exactly 40 years.
Wow.
And it also gives a date in the Dead Sea Scrolls from the destruction of the temple, first temple, until the coming of the Messiah would be 390 years. And guys, it's exactly 390 years. It's and there's a lot of things in there. They give calendars, and in those calendars, it talks about the prophecies, and it talks about the coming prophecies, and they were incredible. You can read about them in Josephus, Pliny, Philo, and they all get A's on their report card because they were such holy men. And they did some amazing prophecies. And that's one of the things about them is they didn't miss on their prophecies. Because if you miss on a prophecy, what's supposed to happen to you?
You get stoned. You're not a prophet.
Yeah, that's it. You're terminated. Well, with that in mind, there was several men that were available at that time. There was a lot of prophecy going on. And it was, let's say, Daniel, Ezekiel, let's see who else. Daniel, Ezekiel, Zedekiah, and Malachi. Malachi and Haggai. They were all available at that time frame, and they were part of this entire story. Mm-hmm. Haggai and Zechariah were actually, according to some of the ancient documents, they were 2 of the 5 men that wrote the Copper Scroll. Wow. And I don't believe they were men at all. I believe they were little boys, what I consider little boys. Jewish people they make the transition from boyhood to manhood at the age of 13.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's about the age that they were whenever they wrote this copper scroll, because in order for that scroll to have been any use to them in the future, because there was a prophecy by Jeremiah that said 70 years they would be in Babylonian captivity. Well, exactly 70 years later, they were back in Israel, and they were rebuilding Zerubbabel's temple, which was a pitiful little thing, but they were beginning. And if they needed money, guess where they got it? It was from these 57 hoards of treasures that are indicated on the copper scroll. There was one place, and we scanned this area with a very powerful metal detector, and it showed that a big portion of that particular hoard of treasure was gone. And I would bet a bunch of money that was where they used it was for the rebuilding of Zerubbabel's temple. So the copper scroll, it provided money for that. And most importantly, a rabbi in Israel told me this. He said, Jimmy, do you realize what this is for, this money? And I didn't, to be honest with you. He said, this is the dowry for the coming bride. That got my attention. And whenever I speak, and especially to Christian groups, whenever they ask, well, what is this for? And I tell them that, their eyes just light up. They know, okay, this makes a lot of sense. As a matter of fact, I'm supposed to go next month to New York. I've been invited by some yeshivas to come up there and tell them about the discovery, about the Copper Scroll Project. They're excited about it. I was invited by one of the men that working here in the United States for Moshe Feiglin, for him to be able to get involved in the Copper Scroll. And he did, and he has gotten involved with the Copper Scroll. But that was a long answer to your question. What is the Copper Scroll? It's a treasure map. I don't like to call it that, but basically that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. And again, it sounds like something that would be the plot of a film. The USA Network came out with something a couple of years ago that was similar to this, but of course they had more intrigue and they were approaching it from a secular Hollywood point of view, not from a Christian or Jewish perspective, with a respect for the prophetic implications of the Copper Scroll. Scholars are really divided on this. Most of them would say, yes, we understand the Hebrew here, and it seems to be describing some rather large hoards of treasure. Just for a frame of reference, Jim, when you're talking about the size or the quantities of treasure described here, the silver and gold, what sort of dollar amount, if you can put a figure on it, is described by the Copper Scroll?
Well, there's 57 hoards, and the 56 hoards that are outside the cave, actually 55, and I'll explain that in a minute. The 55 hoards of treasure outside of the copper, outside of a specific cave that is mentioned on the Copper Scroll. One of them indicates that there are 900 talents of gold in one location. Now, there's some argument about how big a talent is, but the most common figure for the weight amount is 75 pounds.
Right.
So 900 times 75 pounds times 14, which is a troy ounce, and it comes to that one location is worth about $1 billion, actually over $1 billion today.
That could be somewhat...
So that is an indication. Yeah. And all of that... I'm sorry?
I was going to say that could be a little problematic politically, not just in terms of what the government of Israel would want, because this was part of Jordan until 1967. I can see there being some real issues here.
Yeah, there's issues on several different levels, if in fact all these things are there.
Right.
Political, religious, you name it, financial. If they find that much gold and there's 57 other locations, what's it going to do to the gold value? I mean, it's so big, it could actually fluctuate the gold value. And inside of the cave, it talks about the inside of the cave, that it's full of treasures. So they had to start burying it outside and putting it outside and burying it outside in the ruins of Qumran. So there's 55 locations. inside the ruins of Qumran, and people say, well, 57 minus 1 is only 56. But what they don't understand is two of the locations are actually, both of them utilize that cave. The first writer used that cave. It was the third location, and he said inside of that cave was the ephod. Now that's Hebrew for the breastplate of righteousness that the high priest wore on the Day of Atonement. And the other one indicates that the treasures of the house, the last one, number 57, indicates the treasures of the house. The only house that they could possibly be talking about is the Beit HaMikdash, the house of righteousness, or the house, Beit HaMikdash meaning the house, God's house, which the treasures of the house are not gold and silver. That's right. Not what they're talking about. Right. They're talking about implements, artifacts, very precious artifacts within that cave. So I'll stop there and let you go ahead with some more questions.
Well, again, we've talked about this to some degree in the past, and I'm going to put links to those previous interviews in the notes below this interview. Go to skywatchtv.com and find this video, and you'll find the links to the other interviews here, because I want to kind of redirect now toward the event that we're talking about here in April 24th, 25th, and 26th in Troon, Scotland, which is Ayrshire. That's on the Scottish coast, the southwest coast of Scotland, near Glasgow. There'll be 3 days there. You'll be speaking. Sharon and I will be speaking. Pastor Billy Crone will be speaking, and an Irish evangelist, Stephen Wright, will be speaking as well. And he's got an amazing backstory. If you know anything about the political and religious struggles between Ireland and England, he's got an amazing testimony. But over the 3 days, you'll have a little more time to talk than you did just, say, the one evening when you addressed our group there at the hotel in Jerusalem. So with a little more time to kind of lay out the case for the Copper Scroll and what it points to, Jim, what do you think people who attend the Scottish Bible Prophecy Conference are going to take away from this information?
They're going to take away some very interesting facts about Qumran, one of which is Qumran is an identical imagery of Jerusalem. They're also going to find out about the Dominic Qumran being they were the prophets of that time. They're also going to learn that the Melchizedek order, the same order that Yeshua, Jesus, was affiliated with, and he is ruling and reigning now as a priest in the order of Melchizedek, which is not totally different. It's very different from the Levitical priesthood. They maintain the golden rule. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the timing, historic timing of it. I've got some research on from the Dead Sea Scrolls on prophetic timing. We're also going to be talking about the leading up to the discoveries of this Copper Scroll on the second day, and then on the third day, I'm going to disclose some of the locations where these things are at. And I'm actually working on a three-dimensional image of Qumran, so I can actually walk them around on this 3D image and show them these locations on this map. And I'm hoping to have it all completed and ready to go by then, which I believe I will.
No, we're looking forward to it, because that's going to be as fascinating for the rest of us speakers as for the people who'll be attending. Cave 57, which you pointed to when we were at Qumran with you back in May, you mentioned that the treasure of the Copper Scroll is not really in the precious metals, but it's in what had come out of the temple and some other artifact. What do you think, if the day should come that that cave is excavated, what do you think will be found in there?
Oh gosh, well, there's a lot of the precious metals are outside on the grounds, and there are some vessels in there, but inside that cave, there's going to be temple vessels, which is huge. If the records are correct, you're talking millions of artifacts as far as bowls and cups, to serve all the people that were coming there for all the feast days. Then there are also going to be, most importantly, there are going to be artifacts from the tabernacle itself, and including the tabernacle. In 2 Maccabees, it discusses in the same terminology as the Copper Scroll, talking about this cave, that Jeremiah put all these artifacts, including the tabernacle, inside of the cave. Now that alone would be fascinating to take a look at that tabernacle. But the biggest one, of course, is the Ark of the Covenant. It could very well be in there. And it's only 13 miles from Jerusalem. It's not in Africa. It's not in, Anadarko, Oklahoma. It's someplace close to Jerusalem. So I'm going to give them the biggest vote. So that's what I believe is going to be there, Derek.
What I think is amazing is that Second Maccabees describes how Jeremiah took it and headed for the mountain where Moses got his look at the Promised Land. But if you look at a map and draw a line from Jerusalem to Mount Nebo, which is just northeast of the Dead Sea, you see that his path would have taken him very, very close to Qumran. And if he was doing this just in advance of the army led by Nebuchadnezzar, it may well be that he decided that Qumran was a safer place than trying to get across the Jordan River and up Mount Nebo. And especially if those priests there at Qumran had been charged with keeping this type of material for years. It's what's really funny, Jim, is if this pans out, and I will say to viewers that you made a convincing case to me and Sharon when we met, that when Nebuchadnezzar's successor, Nabonidus, and his son, who was ruling in Babylon as his regent, Belshazzar, brought out the temple service to, and I show in my book, Last Clash of the Titans and Bad Moon Rising, that this was actually a feast for the moon god that he was celebrating. And that's when God, Yahweh, said, no, you're done. Tonight is the last night of Babylon. But they weren't even using the good stuff. They didn't even get the good stuff because Jeremiah took it to Qumran and hid it.
Yeah. Qumran is also the treasury, one of the treasuries for the temple. People don't realize that, but on the Copper Scroll, it talks about that. And it also talks about that there is a cliff of judgment that is named on the Copper Scroll. And I spoke with a gentleman by the name of Joe Good. He is an expert, he's like a genius on the temple, building of the temple and the artifacts of the temple. And we were talking about the Day of Atonement goat, where it was pushed off of a cliff at. And the distance from the temple, from the gate to Qumran, is exactly the distance that they name in the Talmud of how far that they had to walk that goat out for the Day of Atonement sacrifice. So we're going to talk about that as well.
If you want to find out more about the Copper Scroll, they've got Jim has got an excellent website, copperscrollproject.com. And if you're interested and you're in the UK or you can get to Scotland, we found that flights from Europe, the mainland, over to London, and then from London up to Glasgow are very affordable compared to flying from the U.S. to get over to Scotland. Don't miss this opportunity to hear the case, to see the evidence for yourself. And then you'll have an opportunity, because this will be a rather intimate gathering, an opportunity to ask questions of Jim, Sharon, me, Pastor Billy Crone, Stephen Wright, over the 3 days of the Scottish Bible Prophecy Conference, the first ever, April 24th, 25th, and 26th in Troon, Scotland, a beautiful seaside village not far from Glasgow. Walker Hall, it's a community center there, and our friend Juan Renau, who is coordinating this, is really, really working hard to make this a success. So we're honored to be a part of this. And Jim, look forward to hearing your presentation again, because, like I said, I'm not exaggerating when I say this is like something from a Hollywood production, except that the Copper Scroll is real. It's sitting in the museum in Amman, Jordan to this day, and we think that you've cracked it.
Well, we're hoping we're going to spend some intimate time with the people that come to Troon to the conference. I want to sit there and ask, off time, whenever we're not speaking, or there's no other speaker speaking, just sit down with them and, have a gathering and just sit and talk. That way I can share a lot. I can share from my heart and not have to worry about keeping a schedule. So tell them that I am looking forward to it. And the guys that are listening in, I would love to sit and visit with you and tell you a lot more.
We're looking forward to it. If you're interested, the website to find out more and to reserve your place is scottishbibleprophecyconference.brushfire.com. I'll put that on the screen here so you can see it. But, of course, the link will be in the notes below this video, wherever you're watching it as well. Jim Barfield is the director of the Copper Scroll Project. His website is copperscrollproject.com. And remember the book, The Copper Scroll Project by Shelley Neese, available at the SkyWatchTV store. You can call or go online to get a copy of that book as well. Highly recommended. It's very well written. And Jim, thanks for your time tonight. We look forward to seeing you and your lovely wife very soon.
Looking forward to seeing you guys. Be safe, Derek.
Jim Barfield, copperscrollproject.com, one of the featured speakers at the Scottish Bible Prophecy Conference. Details on how you can find out more and reserve your place at that conference, as well as some of the other conferences we'll be attending this year, and an update on what's going on with COVID-19, the coronavirus outbreak, as A View from the Bunker continues. Straight ahead. It's ground zero in a supernatural war that's lasted for millennia. Now, see it for yourself. Join SkyWatch TV for a one-of-a-kind tour of Israel to places you'll never forget. Like mysterious Gilgal Rephaim, older than the pyramids, bigger than Stonehenge, and built to venerate the dead. Banias, sacred to the goat demon Pan. The altar of Joshua, where he declared that he and his house would serve the Lord. Bethel, where Jacob saw a stairway to heaven. And Jerusalem, which God has chosen for his resting place forever. SkyWatch TV's Derek and Sharon Gilbert and special guest Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat lead you through the Holy Land from Mount Hermon to the Red Sea, with teaching along the way. And as a special bonus, a 4-day optional extension to Sardinia to see the ancient ziggurat of Monte Dakoti, megalithic tombs of the giants, and the Tophet of Taros, where children were sacrificed to the dark god Baal Haman. Or if you want more time in Sardinia, join us for our separate 8-day tour of the mysterious island. SkyWatch TV's 2020 Tour of Israel, October 12th through 25th, with optional tour extensions in Sardinia. For more information and to reserve your place, log on to lipkintours.com. Talking the walk every Sunday night. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Follow us online, Twitter, @ViewFromBunker or @DerekGilbert. I answer to either one. Our Facebook page, View from the Bunker. We're also on Parlay, Savior Connect, and new Gorf.social. Gorf, Gorf.social. My handle, each of those sites, Derek P. Gilbert. Of course, the easiest way to keep track of this podcast, download our free mobile app for Android or iOS devices, and they will automatically load into your smartphone or tablet wherever and whenever you care to listen. We do appreciate you joining us tonight. February 23rd, 2020, as we come to you this day, the most recent update, official numbers that is, as far as the coronavirus outbreak is concerned, 78,997. And we'll talk about the accuracy of those numbers in just a minute. Deaths now officially at 2,470, 23,425 cases recovered. Now, the new epicenter for the outbreak, it seems to be shifting from China to South Korea. The number of new cases from China, believe it or not, which now reports a total of 76,942, only 6 new cases reported from Saturday into Sunday, whereas South Korea has reported 166 new cases, which is about a 30% increase. They've now got 602. The Diamond Princess, that's the cruise ship docked in Yokohama, Japan, 57 new cases overnight. They've now got 691, and one more death among passengers on board the Diamond Princess. That brings that total to 3. But are these numbers really accurate? There's reason to believe that they are not. This was at first dismissed as conspiracy theory by those who were questioning the numbers, like Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, who was criticized by first the mainstream media because, well, he's conservative Republican, and then the ambassador from China to the United States. And there were those who called Cotton irresponsible for actually saying, we really don't know whether these numbers are accurate and where this thing began. How did this virus get into the wild? And he's right, we don't. But now it appears that the mainstream media is finally catching on to things that Sharon and I have been talking about on Sci Friday for several weeks now. And believe me, we're trying not to spread any fear. And we've seen a little bit of pushback, not a lot, but some pushback from people saying, hey, look, you're fear-mongering. You're being sensationalist here. This is no worse than the seasonal flu because, well, again, the official death total as of tonight is a little over 2,400, not quite 2,500. And over the course of a single year, the seasonal flu, influenza, will kill more people than that. Measles around the world will claim, what was the number I saw yesterday? About 180,000, mostly children, mostly in Africa. So why aren't we talking about those things? A couple of reasons. First of all, we as humans have some immunity to influenza and measles. Most of us have either been vaccinated or been exposed to one or both in our lifetime. So we've got some immunity. That's not the case with SARS-CoV-2. This virus is brand new, and we'll talk about the potential reasons, possible reasons why in just a moment. This is brand new, so we've got no immunity. There is no vaccine for it, no treatment for it. It appears to be spreading as easily as the common cold. The R0 value, which is a term I never thought I'd have to become familiar with, the number of average people who will be infected by your typical, let me rephrase that, the number of people who will be infected on average by somebody who's got the disease. I've seen a number of different estimates for this, but the most recent one I saw by a team in Sweden was about 3.4 compared to the typical seasonal influenza, about 1.8. The SARS outbreak, or rather the Spanish flu outbreak from 100 years ago, which left between 50 and 100 million people around the world dead, depending on who estimates those numbers. They estimate the R0 value of the Spanish flu at about 2.4. So this is more infectious than the Spanish flu, and the case fatality rate seems to be higher as well. So this, is something to take seriously, not something to panic about, but something to take seriously. And again, people who in a position to know are now saying, the change in the curve on the graph of new cases, because when you look at the graph, it appears to be leveling off. But that change appears to be because China keeps changing the way it counts people who've got the virus. So their numbers now are being questioned in mainstream publications like the Washington Post, which earlier this week wrote, and I quote, authorities in Hubei province reported good news Thursday. There were only 349 new coronavirus cases the previous day, the lowest tally in weeks. The bad and puzzling news, Wuhan, the capital of Hubei province, reported 615 cases all by itself. Let that sink in for a moment. The capital of the province reported almost twice as many cases as the entire province, which includes the capital city. So something is wrong there. And it's about time that the mainstream media and our public officials begin to recognize this. Now, the White House has been saying for over a week that they don't have high confidence in the numbers. They've not out and out said the numbers are fake. But let's be honest, these numbers are fake. So that is not good news because it's not helping medical professionals, healthcare professionals get a handle on this when the Chinese government is not being honest about the cases and not being consistent in how the cases are being counted. So that's not good. There's some other things here that are concerning. Coronavirus patient in China reportedly reinfected 10 days after leaving the hospital and cleared. So it appears, and this is something I mentioned during one of the 5 and 10 updates this past week on SkyWatchTV, that a doctor in China has said that because of the drugs that they're using to try to treat the virus, which are pretty strong and have some bad side effects, some harmful side effects as far as cardiac tissue is concerned. When these people get reinfected, they're more susceptible to cardiac arrest because of the damage done by the drugs to try to defeat the virus the first time around. So you got that. People apparently capable of being reinfected. And this virus, unlike other diseases where you show symptoms fairly early on, like, Ebola, for example, the case fatality rate in Ebola is much higher. Anywhere from a third to half of the people who come down with Ebola die. And now that's much, much higher than for this coronavirus. The problem is this coronavirus can be inside your system for as much as 2 weeks, as long as 2 weeks before you start showing symptoms. So there are people walking around who don't know that they have it, who are shedding virus without realizing it and infecting other people long before they start showing symptoms and can be quarantined. So that's one of the reasons that this particular virus, this particular outbreak really bears watching, and just some really good common sense responses by public health professionals, but also by you and me. We just need to wash our hands a lot better and a lot more often. I'm guilty of this, just kind of run it under the water. Don't even bother using soap. Trying to get better about that. Also, the other part of this equation, keep your hands away from your face. I've got a bad habit of, twiddling with my mustache or twiddling with my beard or whatever. And, that's how viruses get transmitted from being picked up on from a surface and then put into close proximity with an access point into my body, eyes, nose, mouth, whatever. We just have to get a lot better about that. And if you travel at all, like Sharon and I have been blessed to do here the last few years, I can't tell you how many times you go into the men's room and you see guys walking right out, right past those sinks and not bothering to stop, much less run their hands underwater. I mean, that's bad enough. But when you got a disease that's spreading like this, that really needs to be your first line of defense. Hand washing with soap and warm water for 20 or 30 seconds is more effective than using hand sanitizer. So we just need to get better about that. Finally, Bloomberg News asking a question that we posed a month ago on Sci Friday. And by the way, you can go back and watch this. SciFriday.tv is our new website for Sci Friday. We're still part of SkyWatchTV. That's not changed. It's just we're putting a website out there for people who just want to see Sci Friday and find it easily. SciFriday.tv. The same deal with Unraveling Revelation. You can find that online, unravelingrevelation.tv as well. But Bloomberg News finally published an article this past week with the headline, Coronavirus May Be Disease X, health experts warned about. Sort of the black swan event, a disease that they couldn't predict that suddenly hits and is very infectious and deadly enough to be dangerous. And again, we asked that question on Sci Friday a month ago because, as I said early in the program, Sharon is very intelligent and she understands the science behind this, the biology behind this, to be able to identify this and say, hey, this really is something that we need to be paying attention to. There are some other troubling incidents that have popped up. We're starting to see this in Chinese prison populations. Those are just like, Petri dishes with walls. And a South Korean psychiatric ward also infected with the coronavirus. On top of which, they said there are about dozens of new cases connected to one particular church in China, in South Korea, where that is. The church is considered a cult because the leader who founded this back in the 80s has declared himself to be the second coming of Jesus Christ. So I'd say that qualifies as a cult. Literally dozens of people came into contact with one person there and are now showing signs of the disease. The troubling thing about that particular cluster of cases is that they don't know where the first patient in this church picked up the disease because he's not traveled out of the country, much less to China. So, yeah, this is really driving public health officials around the world to lose a lot of sleep. Now, while this is going on, a group of biologists at the laboratory in North Carolina that we had previously talked about. This is the group headed up by Dr. Ralph Barrick, who's an expert on coronaviruses. This is the group that back in 2015 published a paper on a new coronavirus that they created in a laboratory with a novel spike. That's the crown-shaped protein spike that allows the virus to enter into a human cell, a host cell. They were trying to determine whether a coronavirus could be transmitted directly from a bat population, because it's known that bats are one of the animal reservoirs for this type of coronavirus. And there are a lot of them in China. The intermediate horseshoe bat is one. So they took one of these coronaviruses from the bat population, and they merged it with another protein from another coronavirus to see if it would infect the ACE2 receptors inside mice, if I understand it correctly. Because ACE2 receptors in mice are very similar to those in humans. So the theory then is if this could happen, then we would have something to worry about, and we'd need to try to come up with some way of defending against it to prevent another outbreak like the SARS outbreak in 2002 and 2003 that killed about 800 people. Well, they succeeded. They succeeded very well. In fact, they freaked out a lot of other scientists who said, hey, whoa, this is really dangerous. Their published research in an academic journal attracted attention from other scientists who understood what they had just done. They created a virus that was very effective at finding a new home in human ACE2 cells, ACE2 receptors, and the treatments that they tried on this new novel coronavirus were ineffective. Okay, antivirals, immunotherapy, not effective. And so other scientists are like, we shouldn't be doing this because the potential benefit of coming up with a defense against this new type of virus isn't worth the risk that it might escape the lab. Now, sharp-eyed researchers pointed out that two of the members of the team at the University of North Carolina in 2015 that conducted that research under the direction of Ralph Barrick are now working at the Wuhan Virology Institute in Wuhan, China, which is ground zero for the outbreak. So as we've said on this program, and as we said on Sci Friday a couple of weeks ago, the evidence suggests that, yes, this was created in a laboratory and that somebody at the lab in China, perhaps these two researchers who were at the University of North Carolina back in 2015, continued their research in Wuhan, and somebody in Wuhan failed to follow proper sanitation protocols. Maybe somebody got bitten by a bat, peed on by a bat, got bat blood on them, whatever, and it somehow got out. That seems to be a plausible scenario, but there's no smoking gun. There is no smoking gun. Nobody has stepped forward and said, yes, we confess, we did it, we admit it. There's also some circumstantial evidence that the Chinese government issued an internal directive very soon after this outbreak, tightening up security and protocols at laboratories working with dangerous pathogens like this coronavirus. Again, circumstantial evidence, not a smoking gun. Now, there are those who've been, and we appreciate you sending us information, because Sharon and I, we try to scan through as much stuff as we can get our hands on, but we don't see everything. But we've seen a number of folks link to an interview that was done on InfoWars earlier this week. Alex Jones talking to a Dr. Francis Boyle, who claims that he's got the smoking gun, that this proof that this is a bioweapon. And Dr. Boyle, who, by the way, is a doctor of law, not a medical doctor, he does have some experience with bioweapons. He helped craft a legal framework for a bioweapons treaty back in the late 70s, early 80s, if I remember correctly. But as far as I can tell from his CV, he's not an expert in molecular biology, virology, epidemiology, or anything of the sort. So it's not clear to me how Dr. Boyle, who again is a doctor of law, knows for a fact that this is a biological weapon that got out of the lab. I'll be perfectly honest, and I bear him no ill will. I just think he's going beyond the evidence. I don't see that he's got any specific access to information that we don't have. In other words, whatever gets published out there on the internet. And he pointed to the same research that was done at the University of North Carolina back in 2015. It doesn't mean they were working on a biological weapon. And let me explain why I said at the beginning of the program that did I say that? Maybe I didn't say that. And it doesn't follow logically that this would be a biological weapon. And here's why I say that. If you're going to release a biological weapon or create a biological weapon, the purpose is to weaken or incapacitate your enemy so that your soldiers can then move in and take over the area that was being defended by the people who were just incapacitated. You don't want the agent you've just used to kill or weaken the enemy soldiers to kill or weaken your own soldiers. And this coronavirus spreads too easily for that. In fact, that is the nature of coronaviruses. The common cold is a type of coronavirus. And you know how easy it is to get that if you've got kids or grandkids who go to school, come home with a cold that they've picked up from a friend. You catch it. You finally get over it after a couple of weeks. Then they come home with another one. We've been through that cycle with our daughter. And if you've got kids or grandkids, you've probably been through it too. The coronavirus would be a terrible bioweapon because it infects indiscriminately. And it keeps circulating and it mutates really fast. It would be a really lousy biological weapon. So for Dr. Boyle to say this, I'm sorry. I just think he's gone way beyond the evidence here. And I think we need to step back and say, wait, okay, let's not panic or freak out about this. First of all, there's not a smoking gun. Secondly, it would be a lousy bioweapon. And thirdly, it doesn't really matter. Okay, maybe it is a bioweapon that escaped a lab. Let's say that it is. How does that help us prepare for it or overcome this? How does it help us as Christians decide what we should do about it? The Christians in Wuhan, according to some videos that I've seen and reports from ministries that work with the underground church in China, is that the Christians in Wuhan are dressing up, putting on, the head-to-toe hazmat-type suits, the N95 masks, and they're going out and handing out other masks for people who don't have them and gospel tracts. That's what they're doing. And that should be an example. If it comes to that here, and we need to deal with it in the way that China is having to deal with it, we as a church should look to that example as a guide for how we should respond. Because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if this is something that was created in a lab with good intentions to try to come up with a vaccine. If it was created in a lab as a bioweapon, it doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter. But, like I said, seems to me that this would be a pretty poor choice for a bioweapon. If I was an evil genius looking to create a biological weapon myself, I would not choose a coronavirus. And I certainly wouldn't patent it. So, all right, enough of the rant. We've got a few conferences on the schedule, and again, we're not sure how this is going to affect our travel plans. We'll just take it as it comes, and God will do what God will do. In fact, Sharon will be talking about the coronavirus situation at the Hear the Watchman conference, the Remnant Warrior Conference from Hear the Watchman, the first weekend in Dallas. That's March 5th through 8th. Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center. As of this recording, there are fewer than 40 seats remaining out of the 300. This is going to be in the lecture hall. So you're sitting in a lecture hall with a desk in front of you, so you can set a laptop up there, a tablet, take notes, have a spot for your coffee. It's going to be a very comfortable setting, but not as many seats as there would be at down in the main conference hall. So if you want to go, the time to act is now, because we're down to the last couple of weeks and the last few dozen seats. HearTheWatchmen.com. Speakers include Paul McGuire, Pastor Paul Begley, Jamie Walden, who you've heard on this program, L.A. Marzulli, and more. Use promo code Gilbert20. That's Gilbert20. That'll save you $20 off the tickets. Streaming video will be available, and the promo code Gilbert20 will save you 20% on the streaming video. So you'll find out more and reserve your place or sign up for the streaming video at HearTheWatchmen.com. The Scottish Bible Prophecy Conference. Jim Barfield, director of the Copper Scroll Project, Pastor Billy Crone, evangelist Stephen Wright, coming from Northern Ireland, will be there as well. This is April 24th through 26th at Walker Hall in Troon. That's on the coast near Glasgow. And we hope you'll be there. Each of us will be speaking each of the 3 days there, 24th, 25th, and 26th. So I'll have 3 presentations. Sharon will have 3, and plenty of time to take and answer questions to the best of our ability. We hope to see you there. And you can find out more information and buy your tickets at scottishbibleprophecyconference.brushfire.com, scottishbibleprophecyconference.brushfire.com. Our friend Juan Renau in Ayrshire is putting this together, and he's doing this out of his own pocket. So to save him, all of us who are speaking at this conference are making our own travel arrangements and covering our own travel expenses so that Juan doesn't have to do this out of his pocket. So we hope and pray that you'll help us make this a success and join us in Troon, April 24th through 26th for the Scottish Bible Prophecy Conference. Got a number of other conferences on the way. Future Vision 2020 from Prophecy Watchers in June. That's in Colorado Springs. The Battle Ready Conference in San Antonio the following week in June. True Legends Conference in Branson, July 10th through 12th. SkyWatchTV's Defender Conference in Branson. That is August 27th through 30th, and we hope you'll join us there. There's going to be a special VIP dinner for people who are VIP members of the VIP Founders Club. Those folks are helping SkyWatch TV complete the new studio, which is within about 2 months now of being completed. Or if you're a sponsor of one of the horses at Whispering Ponies Ranch, you can also join us for that dinner. You don't even need tickets for the conference, which is good because the conference is sold out. But if you want more information, send an email to Charisse Parton. That her email address is cparton, P-A-R-T-O-N, cparton@skywatchtv.com, and she can tell you more. The Igniting the Fire Conference. This is coming to Boise, Idaho. In early September, we'll be there with our colleagues from SkyWatch TV, Donna Howell and Allie Anderson-Henson. The Glacier Prophecy Summit, a cruise to Alaska with L.A. Marzulli, Gary Stearman, Bob Ulrich, Pastor Billy Crone, Jeff Kinley, Dr. Larry Ollison, and more. GlacierProphecySummit.com for more information there. And then, of course, our tour of Israel in October. We appreciate you listening, and just ask you to leave a review at Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever else you find us, which is wherever fine podcasts are sold, or give us a like our Facebook page, View from the Bunker, which is a production of Gilbert House, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Our opening theme is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod. Our announcer, D.C. Good. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.